Good morning. Isn't this weather great today? We'll talk about announcements at the end, but I do want to just kind of let you know that it was basically me and Justin's idea to have the picnic today after church. So this afternoon, this evening. So we've looked out about 3 months ago and figured out that the weather is probably going to be pretty good today. So we decided. So you can thank us later for the great weather we'll have this evening, but. As we continue to talk about Fixer Upper and how God's fixing up our lives and remodeling our lives, we've kind of just to refresh ourselves of where we've been and where we're headed to. We've talked about how remodels are exciting, right? When you're planning them, they're great. You love talking about what you want to do and how to get started, and you love even the demo part of it. But then as you get into work, it's a little bit harder, ain't it? You actually have to get your hands dirty, and you have to finish things out. But the process of actually getting started and thinking is a lot of fun. But when we talk about our lives and how we want God to kind of start renovating us in the areas that we need to work on, that's a little more uncomfortable, ain't it? A little personal, and we don't really get excited about, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for God to just take this sin in my life and just rip it out and just move forward, right? It would be nice if we could be that way, but we know the hard work and the difficulty that would be. So there's a little bit of difference there, but we can be that excited because we know that in the end, if we allow God to remodel our lives, He's going to create something awesome, isn't He? Something finished and pure and perfect. And just like a remodel hopefully is. So that's kind of where we've been. Rick and Vicki shared about the foundation that we have to have. If we want to start any remodel, we've got to make sure our foundation's right and centered on Christ and not on money or success and any other place other than our relationship with Christ. And then we move forward from there, and Jan and Justin shared about their plans and having a plan. If we don't have a target that we're aiming at, then we don't really have that vision, that plan for what God should be doing in our life. So understanding that. And then last week, David and Jamie shared just great about how we have so many tools at our hands right here. But if we don't pick up the right tools, we're going to find ourselves frustrated in our walk with Christ, right? If we get frustrated about where God's at, but have we looked for God in the right places? And are we looking and digging in Scripture and using our community around us in our prayer life, right? So that's kind of where we've been. Today, I kind of shared last week that we're going to talk about sandpaper people today, right? And we all have people in our lives, sometimes our family, and like even in our home, that, not my home though, promise you, okay? That rub us the wrong way, right? That just get under our skin, push our buttons, drive us insane. Or maybe you've kind of noticed that, like I shared last week, maybe you've noticed like you seem to always be rubbing people the wrong way. Maybe you're the sandpaper person around you, and you just seem to like drive people crazy, and they misread you and misunderstand you all the time. Like, it's kind of funny, and we laughed about it last week because I was being sarcastic with it, but that truly could be us, right? We could truly find ourselves just rubbing people the wrong way, not understanding why that happened. So today we kind of want to look at that. So either way, how do we answer this question? How do we ensure that our relationships in our life and with our family are built to withstand the storms? Because storms are going to come, right? Conflict's going to happen. Tension's going to arise. How do we withstand that? And what do we even do to storm-proof our relationships, right? How are we prepared to handle the storm? So these are the areas that we kind of want to talk about. Now, back to sandpaper people. We all have sandpaper people, at least one, right? We're not naming names today, okay? No names. Especially if it's me, okay? That's why I'm really afraid for you all to name names. Afraid it might be me. But we have them, right? And likely we have more than one. Those people that we have to love, right? Think about the maybe family or at least somebody that you have to get along with at work or in your life that just cross your path, a neighbor maybe, that we have to get along with. We know we have to love them, we have to get along with, but it is so difficult. Maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's an in-law or an aunt and uncle or a parent, somebody you go to work with or somebody you go to church with. Maybe it's your child that just drives you crazy, knows how to push your buttons. See, these people are often people that seem to be prideful, don't they? Make their way known to all. They've got to kind of be the center of attention and grab it no matter what cost. Selfish. Or maybe it's somebody that's always complaining, that pushes your buttons and just rubs you the wrong way. Somebody complaining or finding everybody else to blame for issues going on in life, right? All of us have those people in our lives. All of us probably find ourselves being that to some extent. The ones that walk in the room and push our buttons, and it seems like it's just because they want to get under our skin, isn't it? Like that's what we perceive it as. But unfortunately, we just can't. God calls us to a higher standard, doesn't He? God calls us to love all people, not just the lovable people, but the unlovable as well. So in 1 John chapter 4, verse 11, I want to read that this morning as we kind of get started. Because it says this, "Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." See, that's a high task, isn't it? To love one another, like because God loved us, we should love one another. And we know that, right? We've been told that. We've been raised that way. You should be nice to other people because God's been nice to you. Or just in general, then we should be nice and treat each other nicely, right? And sometimes if you go back to that person that rubs you the wrong way, that sandpaper person, like you're like, nah, there's no way. This is impossible for me to love this person. I cannot do it, right? And you're probably right. You can't do it. Can't do it on your own, can you? Not on your own strength. See, God's love is different than ours. And I just have been reflecting on that this week, that God's love is really different than our love. See, oftentimes we love according to how we feel. God doesn't. So we love according to how we feel. You have a friend that is caring for you and helping you out this weekend and expressing love to you, it's going to be easier to express love back to them, right? Or a spouse that has served you when you've just been down in the dumps, it's easy to love that person. Somebody on the way home from church cuts you off on the highway and is driving like a maniac. It's not going to be very easy to love that person, right? It's going to drive you crazy, and you're not going to want to have any kind of feeling of love in you, right? Because we just naturally want to love based off of how we feel. God doesn't do that. See, as we kind of go forward, I want us to talk about how do we love those sandpaper people in our lives. But I also want to say this just up front. There are some people in your life that are not healthy to be in your life. You know, as a last resort, this is not a cop-out because you don't want to have to deal with tough people in your life, okay? But as a last resort, I truly believe that sometimes distance is the best thing. And loving from a distance, okay? Now, don't make this as an excuse to just kind of every time something, a rocky relationship happens, just say, I'm backing away because Kevin said it was okay, and use me to justify your actions, right? This should be a last resort. But I truly believe, because I've experienced in my own life, that sometimes I can only really love people from a distance. That I'm best at loving that person, at least at this time in my life, from a distance. See, we can't run away from most people, but we can kind of keep them out of reach from our little button that drives us crazy, that they like to touch, right? They like to hit. We can love them from a distance, and sometimes the best way to love people is just to sincerely pray and have that space. And that's going to look different in every situation, but there are times when I truly believe that. But kind of going back to, I think there's a reason why God wants us to love people, not just run away from conflict and stressful situations. And I think it's because He wants to do some of His best work with us when He places those sandpaper people in our lives. See, God brings us those people for a reason. Now, that's what I want to talk about this morning. Why? What's that reason? What good can come from this, right? Of having to put up and love somebody that's so tough to love. First of all, I think we need to kind of reflect on ourselves here. We started out life pretty rough, pretty tough, pretty rough around the edges, didn't we? Like, when we didn't know Christ, we hurt people intentionally, right? We hurt people unintentionally. We were just sinners. And God brings sandpaper into our life, those kind of people into our life to smooth us out, take away our rough edges, right? You all remember, I don't know how long ago it was that Vince shared about the Coke bottle he found on the beach, right? But he talked about just the friction, and that it came just something beautiful. And if you hadn't heard that story, I know Vince would love to tell you because it's a super cool story. But just that smoothness of being roughed over and over and over can really smooth us out, right? For example, get us... do y'all know that, I'm sure you do, because the way I was going to say it made it sound like I was an expert at handyman stuff, and most of you know that I'm not and would laugh, right? So I'm not going to say it that way. But there's different kinds of sandpaper, isn't there? Different kinds of grit. Like there's heavier grit, takes off more sand, right? Or more wood, or whatever you're sanding. The finer grit's going to make it smoother, right? And so, like I have this file here, and one side of it's got some major teeth on it. And so if you ran that across some wood or something, it's going to really rip that wood down, right? But then there's a finer side that really smooths out. And I truly believe that we have people that are just like the rough end, right? That just rip us to pieces, but then we have people around us that kind of challenge us and cause us to kind of smooth out. But as this summer ended, we put down wooden floors in our house, and we love them. I love them because Kendra loves them, and it's worked out really well that way, okay? Every once in a while I pretend like I have some say-so in the decorating and stuff like that, but it's really just a front to kind of save face for myself. But we love them, and this is a little piece of it, okay? I wanted to bring it this morning. This is like a piece that was cut. It was a rough cut at first, right? And then they finished it and sanded it, and you can still see the nicks in it and some things like that because that's the kind of the flooring we wanted, knowing because we had kids, and it would kind of blend in with the natural nicks and stuff that are in there, right? But this has been treated. This is super durable. The reason why Kendra wanted wooden floors so much is because of just the things that collect in carpet sometimes, right? And so the high traffic areas, she wanted wooden floors because these are so durable. You spill something, you can wipe them up, right? They've got the sealant on it, and so unless you spill like a bathtub on them, they're gonna survive and be really durable, right? It takes the dropping of toys and the dropping of instruments and different things like that you may drop on it, and it's gonna be durable. It's hard. It works well. It takes the beating well. They don't carry that odor or the dirt that the carpet does. They're really low maintenance for the most part, right? You can broom them, sweep them, and then spray the stuff on them, and they look really good. But I also brought this other piece here that Kendra wanted to make some shelving out of, okay? And this is like just a rough cut piece of wood. This would not be good to walk on, would it? Right? It would be kind of painful to kind of use this as your floor. And one time we didn't have much of a choice but to kind of use this stuff, but we've evolved, right? And so we've learned better. This is kind of painful. If I just had a rough cut of wood like on this side here, I'm not sure Harper would be very happy with her dad right now when she's trying to crawl and learn how to walk, right? It's painful. This kind of wood would be painful to walk on. You would have splinters. It would not be good for us. Now, the shelving that I put in some shelving that Kendra had picked out, and we put it in just like that, and we were going to put shoes on it and some bags and backpacks and stuff, and the first time I went to go, I kind of set them in there to make sure it was all right because I don't trust my measurement and my cutting abilities. And as I put them in, I realized like there were some splinters and some jagged pieces. I'm like, we need to sand those down first, right? Because I'm going to be putting my foot in there, and the girls are going to be putting their feet in there to take their shoes off, and I don't want us to be nicked up and have those splinters. So the floors are easier, but there would be a more painful way if I just put that rough lumber in there. See, like you can't get close to the rough lumber and not expecting some pain, right? You're going to get hurt. I think relationships are the same way. I think if we want to have long-lasting relationships, we have to have that smoothness about us, some usefulness, some forgiving, just like I was talking about the floors. to be able to endure life, right? See, we can't go around in life just as a rough cut of lumber and expect people to really see Christ, can we? We have to allow God to be smoothing us out and sanding us down and using those people in our lives. So here's the question. Will you allow the master carpenter to use the sandpaper and those people to smooth you out? Or will you be the one inflicting splinters to everyone that comes close to you? See, we have that choice. Are you going to be somebody who heals or somebody who hurts? Somebody who causes healing or somebody that causes more damage? We have that choice in every step of the way, in every relationship. And oftentimes we think about those sandpaper people, and it's so hard to love and care for them because they're so attacking, right? It's so personal, some of the things they do and say. But I think one of the most important things to remember, and one of the most important things I've learned as being a teacher over the past several years and working with youth, is oftentimes it has very little to do with you or me, right? Oftentimes the hurt and pain that they're causing you or your family has very little to do with you. Mostly to do with them. Their attitudes, their behaviors aren't necessarily an attack on you as a person. You're just there to receive it, right? To give you an example, if you have kids and your kid sins and struggles because they're a sinner, right? Not because they just want to ruin your day, even though there are probably times you think that is the case, right? They're just sinners like we all are. And so sometimes we think of that as an attack on us because they just want to make it miserable on mom or dad or whoever's raising them. That's not usually the case. Your husband maybe irritates you, or your boyfriend irritates you because he's a human, right? Well, because he's a guy probably is a better way of saying it, right? Not because he's trying to make life miserable. I mean, it may be, right? It may be pretty miserable. Well, oftentimes there's so much more in that. Maybe you have in-laws that just rub against your grain because their worldview is different than yours. So most likely it's not because they hate you or they don't like you. It's just that there are two completely different ends and different worldviews and different upbringings. Or maybe it's your parent that just drives you crazy in some way. It's probably not because they just thought, I'm going to drive my kids crazy, right? They're doing the best they can with the tools they have and they know how to use, right? See, oftentimes it's not personal. We make it personal. It's hard for us not to make it personal. But it has very little to do with you and me when that happens. See, there are also different personalities in how we approach things, right? This is even more evident in how we react to things. Just because this is probably the opposite, but this is the way I've written it down. But just because I'm an introvert doesn't mean that I'm a snob, right? But sometimes that's the way we perceive introverts. Or because I'm an extrovert does not mean that I just want all the glory. I'm a glory hog. Hey, everybody look at me, right? But oftentimes that's the way we see extroverts. Look at them. They just want the attention, don't we? See, we're all wired differently for a purpose, God's purpose. And often when we have conflict, whether it's justified or not, we need to remember how often we are difficult and offensive to God and who God's created us to be, right? It's easy for us to get frustrated with somebody, whether it's a spouse or a kid or somebody in our family or a coworker, wherever it may be, right? But we forget how much God's put up with us, right? How many times we've decided to do things our way, in our hurtful way, but yet carry around that I'm a believer flag, right? Sure, that can be frustrating for him, but he loves us the same. So whenever we deal with conflict or sin with others, we need to remember our own sin. We forget how patient God's been with us repeatedly, right? We forget how merciful and loving God has been as we lose our temper again and we mouth off something we later probably realize that we should have helped. Or we neglect our duty to serve somebody else at home or in the workplace. Or even our pride as we believe that we've got it all figured out. So back to unlovable people, the sandpaper people. Why would that be something that God wants in our life? And why sandpaper people in our life? And here's a few reasons. I think it's to make us more like Him, right? How many sandpaper people is in God's life? Right? So as we love those who are the hardest to love in our life, how does that renovate and renew our life? How does it change it and remodel us into a better person, a more godly person? I think it refines us and sands us into His image, right? He's renewing us, giving us a better purpose. I think it's so we can love how He loves. See, God just doesn't love those who are worthy of love, right? Because we wouldn't be loved. And I also think it's to remember that He's God and we're not when we have those sandpaper people in our lives. For Matthew 5:46 says this, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same?" Right? God's just saying, if you love who loves you, what difference are you? How does that set you apart like you're called to be? It doesn't, does it? Everybody loves people who loves them. Most everybody does. We respond to all people with love when we choose to see them as a valuable person created by and in the image of God, right? When we love people unconditionally, those people that are super difficult, when we love them from a distance, we can do that when we realize that this person is created by God. And this person's created in the image of God just like me. Right? It's not based on how we feel about them. Oftentimes that's what we want, right? We go off of how we feel about them, is how much we love them or care for them. But God views it differently. And let's take a look at that as we kind of wrap things up. 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. It says, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, and it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It will always protect, always trust, always hopes, and always perseveres." Josh, will you go back up to that first part again? We could also, because we've talked about how God is love, right? And so there's no difference in if we just put God in there, right? God is patient. God is kind. This is what we're called to do too, right? Kevin is patient. Kevin is kind. Kevin does not envy, right? We could say this about God, and our goal is to say this about ourselves. Because that's when we're loving like God is calling us to love. Thanks, Josh. See, love's not a feeling, it's a choice. Oftentimes we love based off our feelings, but love isn't a feeling. Like, I can love my wife no matter how I feel, right? Am I choosing to do that? Do you choose to do that in your relationships? It's a choice that leads to a loving response towards others no matter how you feel. And it's not easy, is it? It doesn't make us, okay, good job, Kevin, thanks for pointing that out, and let's go do it. Hoorah, right? It's hard, but we don't have to do it on our own. We have God's direction and guidance and strength with us. And as you move forward, if you want your life to change, if you want to grow closer to Christ, if you want to remodel here that God's doing in your life to be changed and long-lasting, then it has to start with loving people unconditionally. It has to have that. Because without that, we're lost. Without that, we're lost. It can't be based off of how we feel about that person. It's got to strictly be on what God calls us to do. Let's pray. God, thank you for loving me, not because I'm lovable, but because you are love, God. Thank you for loving all of us, not because we're lovable, but because you are love. God, I just pray that this week you'll help us love the unlovable in our lives, just the same way you've loved us, God, unconditionally, God. God, God, I know it's not easy, but God, my prayer is that we want to see the transformation in our lives. And we know that that requires experiencing your love and then ultimately loving others like you've loved us, God. So, God, when we want to love people based off our feelings this week, God, help us to take a step back so that you can transform our lives. And may we just love people like you've loved us. Because ultimately we know your love never fails. We thank you for that, God. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen. Let's stand.
Yeah, I remember one time there was a fella when I was working in Wycliffe at the plant, and he was mean as a snake. And I'm not going to tell you I did anything great. I decided I wasn't going to take it, and I pushed right back on him. Come to find out, nobody knew. They diagnosed him with cancer. He died like 3 weeks later. He was racked with pain, and I didn't know that, and I didn't stop to think, why is he being so ornery? You can tell I have guilt about that still, because hearing that is what it made me think of. It's hard to know why people are the way they are, but what Kevin said, it's generally not about us. It generally isn't, and you can't get past, what's immediately there. Still feel guilty about that. I wish I could tell you how many times God chose the song. I didn't know how the sermon was going to go. I didn't pick this song because of the sermon. I guess God did. He knew. I love that.